Hello and welcome back to the Right Brain podcast. It's become a thing where I kind of talk about my dad's outfits sometimes because I don't even know what he's going to be wearing sometimes. So we happen to film 2 episodes today, so he just changed into this outfit and I think it's really cool. I told you last night that preppy mixed with the tattoos, it's the duality. That's the vibe.
Okay. Well,
and
thank you.
We're going to get matching tattoos. We're going to put sayings on our shirts that say, I've always been crazy, but it's kept me from going insane, which is funny because me and my dad talked about getting that tattoo together years and years and years ago. And now it kind of feeds into what we've manifested into our podcast.
And Waylon Jennings, that's his quote from a song.
Yes.
So obviously we're in Nashville.
Yeah, that's true. It actually is the perfect combination. So you guys can let us know what you think of that quote. We don't care because we think it's cool, but you can still let us know. Also, I told my dad that he should get it tattooed on his neck, but he's scared of getting a neck tattoo. So
I don't know. Your mom wants me to do that, actually. She said she thought that was cool. And of course, a lot of my tattoos I got because your mom thought it was cool. And I wanted to, for her to...
You wanted to impress her.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I have her name 3 times on my body somewhere, or 3. She made, her favorite number is 3.
He literally has Carolyn across his stomach. It's crazy.
And I have a picture of her, and I have my first tattoo is her name, of course. So
love.
had to be 3 times. It was her rule. That's why when I first said to her, I want to get a tattoo, she said, okay, but only if it's my name.
Yeah. Yeah. Now she's really, every time you get a tattoo, she's like, if it's about me, you can keep getting them.
And we always said, if we had ever broken up, which of course we never will, I could only probably be with someone named Carolyn.
Yeah, that would really narrow it down. Wow. Okay. Also, before we dive into what we're going to talk about, I also just want to check in with you guys and let you know that I am 41 days of no drinking.
Woohoo!
And I've been working on my brain for you because when we talked about it in the beginning, I was like, wow, I haven't drank in 4 days. This is crazy. But yes, now I'm at 41 and my anxiety is a lot more manageable. Have I still called my dad this week asking if he's mad at me at random times? Sure. But I have my mornings when I said that I was having really, really bad anxiety have gotten a lot better. My sleep has gotten a lot better. I've been wearing my red light glasses. I've been using my brain driver that I've talked about before. You guys can see it here. This is something that I use. You can just use it for 20 minutes a day. It comes with 2, what are they called? The wires?
Electrodes?
That's what, 2 electrodes. One dims down the side of your brain that's overactive and the other one stimulates the other side, and it really helps balance out my mood and just my my ups and downs. So and you can find this on my dad's website or on the Right Brain website, but it's been really helpful. But yes, still I gave myself certain financial goals that I would like to reach, and I told myself I can't start drinking again until I reach those. So I'm saying that out loud.
There you go. And there's other things that we want to add, but you're now, doing the things because we had talked about that, you have
to walk the walk.
Exactly. You have to lead by example, right? Always.
Yes.
You have to be that. And you have done that, but it's just a matter of consistency. And I think if anybody's listened to this podcast, they know that that's a difficult thing sometimes for people with right brain.
Not me.
Is consistency, because that means doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And for right brain people, that is like death in some cases, where, where the left brain loves to do the same thing over and over and over and over. But the right brain doesn't. It gets bored really quickly. It needs change. It needs to do different things, and it needs to change it up and all of that. So to be consistent with routines and foundational things, which is really the key to being really successful in almost anything in life. You can't be a great singer or songwriter if you're not doing it all the time. If you're not always practicing how to play the guitar or singing, or you have to practice, even as an athlete, you have to practice over and over, and many of them foundational. Bruce Lee said that he really only practiced 28 basic moves. He never did anything advanced. He just did those 28 moves over and over until he was so good at each one of them. And then he would combine them together in different ways during a tournament or something. But
yeah.
And that's tough for right brain people to do, is to be that consistent with mundane routine things.
Well, me and Bruce Lee are very similar people, so people mix us up a lot. So I'm gonna keep doing these over and over again.
You did go to Tiger Shoulder.
I did. I got kicked out of karate class when I was younger. Beat my brother up in class.
Right, because you beat
he
brother
deserved
up.
it. That was not good. Mom was not happy that day. I'll never forget that. But anyway.
I couldn't help but laugh. When I heard it, she called me up and I just was laughing. I was like, oh my God, that's just...
You're teaching us how to fight people, and God forbid you actually fight someone in class. They're like, you can't do that. I'm like, what the hell? What are we here for?
I can't beat up my little brother.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, not to get off topic. We have been talking a lot recently because I mean, there's been... We already talked about Louis Capaldi a couple times on here. He has Tourette's, and then I've had a lot of questions about people with stutters and stuff. There was a kid in my acting class who had a stutter, and I remember finding that really interesting because he would say like when he would sing that he didn't have a stutter anymore. And then when we spoke to my friend Danae recently, she was discussing how she why can't I speak? Do I have a stutter now? Am I getting an empathetic stutter?
Maybe.
Okay. Anyway, she was saying how she got a stutter by kind of being thrown off. Anyway, I feel like this is just a culmination of, I had a lot of questions about stutters and Tourette's and certain people in my life that struggle with those things. So my dad was kind of explaining, because it is confusing, because they can be on both sides of the brain. So I was wondering why certain people that seem right brain had certain things and left brain had certain things.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the story of Danae is fascinating because clearly very, very talented, gifted, right brain dominant person in
She's
many
a
ways.
comedian.
You
can hear her episodes.
She was a Division I athlete. I mean, but what was really fascinating was to highlight the dynamics of the brain. When we go back to, you need to do this with yourself, and one of the reasons why you're doing it is because we talked about that there's no such thing as like you get the brain to a certain point where it's perfectly balanced and then it stays that way forever. No, it can get tipped out of balance relatively easily. And the more talented and the more gifted you are, it can do that. And that was one of the, really best stories that we've done here. I've seen this in my practice for many years, but where she, went for help on her brain. And this is another thing that's really important, is that not all brain stimulation is equal. So people go out there, and a lot of the brain programs are really geared towards maybe doing one thing, like computer-based, cognitive exercises, or doing different things that work on the eyes or the inner ear or your reaction time or your attention, or doing what's called cognitive skills. And not really looking as much at the foundation of the body or brain development or understanding the concept of this imbalance. They're thinking like, well, let's just stimulate the brain and, make it better. You have a problem with your brain, you're not feeling good, you have problems with memory or depression or whatever. If we stimulate your brain with magnets or something like that, then it should help. But that's not the way it works. That you have to do it very specifically. And the foundational thing you need to do is understand this concept of imbalance, how things can go out of imbalance. And so with her, when she went through this brain stimulation program, which I'm sure their intentions were good, and I'm sure they've gotten good results on other people, but they made her brain so out of balance to the point where it created her having a stutter that she never had her whole life. But it also showed, where a stutter comes from, how it's a byproduct of this imbalance. At the same time, she had this severe depression that came on. She couldn't leave her home. And that is absolutely related to this imbalance in these different networks on both sides of the brain. And it was really just such a clear example, which means also that if we're doing things and everything we do activates or stimulates our brain, that we can throw it so out of balance that we can actually bring on a stutter, we can bring on a tic, we could bring on OCD, we can bring on severe depression, we could bring on, psychosis, all different types of things by the way we use our brain. And the more talented you are in one area, the more likely you are to be able to tip yourself out of balance. So this is kind of foundation of what we're talking about. And when we talk about, I've had a number of patients throughout the years that were labeled with Tourette's that really had stuttering, and that, you know, it looks similar in many ways because it's noises and it's sounds and it's very, you know, choppy and broken up. And they are very different. The traditional stuttering is a left brain deficit in an area called the inferior frontal gyrus, the Broca's area, which is what's called Brodmann area 44 and 45. That's the motor expressive area of speech. And on the other side is the area more for nonverbal communication, but also where we're really aware of what other people are thinking, and that can also generate, you know, things like anxiety or negative emotions like sadness or shame or guilt. And so we see that, you know, when that area on the right is overactive, we know that is what stuttering is, right? Where there's a deficit on that left side. And it creates this choppiness of, you know, staccato type of thing, what's called ataxic speech. And Tourette's can look like that in some ways because it may have a vocal component to it. But they're very different neurologically. But then there's, you know, because Tourette's typically is more of a left brain dominance, right brain deficit.
Really?
Yeah, typically. But like OCD is more typically that. But there's an OCD version, and there's a right brain version of OCD and ADHD.
I have a question about that, because I've been thinking about that, because I feel like, so I always find that fascinating when you say there's like two different sides of things like that you could see, because you're saying my OCD, I know we've gone over this before, but just like to run over it, like the type of OCD I have is like I had to touch things a bunch of times, to like, you know, step on things a certain way, had tap things, overthink things, like go back, redo them, whatever. Then there's like the OCD where you have to like organize stuff, and maybe that's the other side. I don't know. Well, I'm not explaining that well.
The right, wherever there's an imbalance, you may have overactivity of certain functions and the inability to stop it, right? Because again, the brain is always working in this dynamic balance. The way the brain should work is both hemispheres should be very different, and control different things more specifically. But they need to be balanced and integrated. They need to be able to work together, and there needs to be this flow. So most information comes in through the right brain first. The right brain is, you know, kind of make sure it's safe and is filtering it and is saying, okay, you know, I'll allow this to come through. And then it goes into the left brain. And the left brain is more about analyzing that information, storing that in memory, putting it into different categories, being able to utilize it for a tool to be able to go after a goal. Speech is part of that. Being able to sequence information, being able to predict. We talked about the brain doing predictive models about what, if I make this choice or this choice, what's going to be. So am I going to make the best choice? And then being able to determine, did I make the right choice or not? Should I do that again or should I not do it again, right? So the left brain then needs to send it back to the right brain for the right brain to put it into context with the world, with ourselves, get the big picture of what that information means. Like, left brain is more details and information and data, where the right brain is more wisdom. You know, what does that data mean from a big standpoint? How is it going to impact the world and people around us? How's it going to, affect my life? And the right brain needs to be able to then think of things that way and really get a deeper understanding of what all this information means, and how it, can be used. And so that flow needs to constantly go back and forth. If there's an imbalance where one side of the brain gains too much of control or advantage, it blocks that flow of information. And what we're trying to do is restore that flow. we're trying to restore that balance.
Okay, can you explain why, like, specifically stuttering and Tourette's has two different sides and what the differences are? Like, what is a right brain deficit Tourette's and what is a left brain deficit Tourette's, and stuttering as well?
So stuttering, we see that, as we said, there's a very specific area on the left side of the brain that generates the motor production of speech. So being able to coordinate your muscles and movements.
And that's why you say that autistic kids who are nonverbal, because they don't have full coordination of their...
Because they can't feel it. Not because they can't generate it, but because...
Okay, now I'm confusing myself, sorry.
So that left brain does generate words, and it generates the physical ability to speak, which means, speech is the most complicated motor act that any animal on our planet has ever achieved. Number 2 is bipedalism. We talked about that. But then speech is really hard. It's 100 muscles that need to be perfectly synchronized, and especially the tongue and the lips and the mouth. In our brain, we create something called a homunculus, meaning that...
That's a ridiculous word, but
it's
okay.
Homunculus. So it means that we have a map of our body in our brain. We literally create 3D maps in our brain of our body. And we have a sensory map and a motor map, which means that as a baby is moving through the world initially and crawling through the world, especially in the first 3 years, when the right brain is forming, we take information from the body, from our muscles, from our spine, from our inner ear, from our eyes and eye movements. And all of that comes into the brainstem, goes up into our brain, and the right brain is developing first. And there's an area called our parietal lobe, which is where we feel our body. And we literally use that information to create this 3D map. It's a distorted 3D map, but it's a 3D map of the body in the brain. And the right brain has a whole map, a whole sensory map for the body, so that we become a whole person in the right brain, right? So again, the whole idea, holistic medicine, holistic. And that is what people with autism that are non-speaking are not developing. They're not developing that. They don't have this picture in their brain because that information from their body and their inner ear and their eyes is not getting through the brainstem up into the brain because the primitive reflexes and immaturity in the brainstem are holding it back, kind of like blocking it. So they don't have this. And if you look at this map, the biggest part of the map by far, 30% of the whole map, is basically the mouth, the face, the tongue, and the lips. Because that is for verbal and nonverbal communication. We need to feel that part of our base and our face, our tongue, our lips. We need to feel that more than any other part to be able to move it. Because then once we develop a sensory map, then we develop a motor map in the frontal lobe. That is, how do we move that part of our body? So first we need to feel the body. We need to create this map in our brain of our body, and then we can move the body. So that is really one of the foundational issues why kids with autism don't speak, because they don't feel their body. They haven't created these maps, and so therefore they can't move their body. And especially, many of them say, I don't feel my tongue. I don't feel my mouth. It's numb. I had parents the other day tell me that their child literally bit through their bottom lip, and they were gushing blood, and they were trying to stop it. And the child didn't know what was wrong, never felt it. And many of these non-speaking kids, when they do letterboard writing or write on a computer, they'll tell us, I don't feel my tongue, I don't feel my body. One kid said it perfectly to me. I asked him, why can't you speak? And he said, I don't see my body in my brain, and so I can't move my body to speak. And that's exactly what he described, right? So when we look at that, the actual mechanics of speaking, first we have to feel all our body. We have to feel all these muscles. Like even when we feel emotions, So we have to feel our face. When you're alone and you're, watching something on your phone, let's say, or if you're talking to somebody on a phone, you may smile, you may frown, you may use facial expressions. But why are you doing that? That person can't see you. So why do we use facial expressions when we're not actually talking to somebody?
Because I'm an entertainer.
No, because what we have first and foremost, the reason why we have facial expressions of different emotions.
To let ourselves know?
To let ourselves know, first of all. And those movements are universal. Doesn't make a difference what language you speak. Surprise, anger, happiness. In your facial expression, it's universal amongst every language.
I do think a lot about, and you're going to say, you think a lot about this? I do. I think a lot about this. If a baby was born and every time you wanted to make it smile, you frowned, if it would think that frowning was smiling and it would frown when it was happy and it would smile when it was sad. But then I kind of just let that go after a little while because I never come to an actual answer.
It's kind of true to a certain extent, but because facial expression and emotions is so foundational, you couldn't do that. You couldn't feel happy and frown. It would literally be almost impossible to do that.
I'm trying to right now.
But this is pretty interesting. Years ago, there was a study where they had people look at facial expression and they wanted them to say what emotion was that person feeling. So they had a number of people that did it. And they found that there was a certain population of people that were terrible at it, that could not tell accurately what the emotion was. And these were people that had Botox in their face.
Oh, right.
Because what tells us what we're feeling is our facial muscles.
Oh, so people having Botox not being able to tell themselves that then they forget those emotions?
They didn't know.
What are they, just turn into robots?
They didn't know what emotion they were feeling. Because when somebody has an emotion, what happens subconsciously, if you smile, I smile. I literally, micro movements in the muscles of my cheek will contract. And this has been measured in studies where they put electrodes on people's faces and they can look for micro electrical movement and activity. And so if you frown, I'm going to frown. But you don't see it in me, but it happens. But it happens enough that my brain registers it.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
So my brain, literally, my face mimics your face. My body will mimic your body movements. And that tells my brain what you're feeling because I compare it. I say, when my cheeks contract, I'm happy. And so her cheeks are contracting because I'm mimicking her subconsciously, automatically. And I know what she's feeling because I know what I feel when my cheeks do that. I'm happy.
Damn, I have a friend. I really like her a lot. And also she's very beautiful. She has a lot of Botox. And sometimes I'll tell jokes and she'll just look at me. And I'm like, she not like my joke? And then she'll literally go, ah, but her whole forehead won't
move, right?
And it stresses me out. I think it's putting stress on our friendship.
Yeah.
I'm going to let it go for now, but it's tough to navigate because I'm like, I don't know what you're thinking because nothing's moving and I'm an empathetic person. All right. Anyway, if you have Botox, you're fine. But I'm just saying, well, I guess maybe you're not.
No, but that's
I got it once.
It literally, again, the long-term effects of, because what does Botox do? It literally paralyzes your muscles in your face.
Yeah.
And so therefore they can't contract, which means you can't mimic other people's facial expressions accurately. And you don't know what your own, you're not really expressing your own emotions fully. So therefore you don't know, if our face muscles are not moving, we won't know what emotion we're feeling. And many people on the autism spectrum say that they'll feel this overwhelming emotion sometime, but they don't know what it is. They don't know if they're happy or angry.
Because they don't have control over their face.
Because they don't feel their face, they don't feel their body, and they may not be able to control the muscles. That's why 1/3 of the whole map we have in our brain is our face. not only to control our tongue, and the tongue is by far the biggest part of the map, on both the sensory and the motor, so that for us to be able to control speech, we have to be totally in touch with our body. We have to feel our body. So, a lot of kids that have left brain deficits, they have a history of going through speech therapy when they're young. They may also have language delays, and they also have like a lisp, or, they have problems really articulating, and they may even have a stutter. And that's more of a left brain issue that has to do with that whole mechanism, meaning
left brain
speech.
Deficit.
That's a left brain deficit.
Right, okay.
And with that, they have overactivity of the right, which is what inhibits that area. And this is what, can lead to stuttering and, other speech and articulation problems that are left brain. That's different than autism. Now, so when we look at stuttering, this area of the left side of the brain,
Broca's area 44-5.
44 and 45. Very good.
Oh, wow.
And also along with an area called the cerebellum.
Mm-hmm.
And the cerebellum is what smooths out our movements so that we don't have a tremor, or we're not like moving in a really,
I've always had a tremor, right?
You have. From the time you were actually born, I think that had a lot to do with you being in the hospital for the first 2 weeks and not being touched. And anyway, but the cerebellum, whenever you have an oculomotor imbalance in your eyes, like you had as a kid.
I have a lot of things.
It's always involving the cerebellum, and it's always involving the brain. Like, it's never an eye muscle problem for the most part. When people have a strabismus or a lazy eye, it's never really an eye problem. It's a central brain issue, and especially the cerebellum is involved. So the cerebellum is what gives us coordination. The right cerebellum with the left frontal area is what helps coordinate speech so that we use our muscles perfectly in this flow. And if there's a breakdown of that, then we can't do it. It's not going to come out fluidly. It's going to come out really in a very uncoordinated way. And that's what stuttering is. And then when you have anxiety and when you're really aware that you're stuttering, and again, they're right brain dominant people, so they're hyper aware to what other people are thinking and being judged. Just imagine that, right? And so that judgment activates the exact opposite side on the right brain. So now the right brain comes up, shuts it down on the left even more.
Wow.
Makes it even harder to speak. And that's where stuttering, can really even shut down and even get to what we call selective mutism, where they can't speak at all. What
about why, like, singing, does that help people's stutter go away?
Well, the two different things. One is the left brain is about verbal speech. The right brain is singing. We had talked about this a few times. Ian McGilchrist talks about this. That
Ian, we love you.
The foundation of human language was actually song. That singing, obviously it's what birds do, and, they communicate, and all other animals communicate through a form of like song, whether it's crickets or whether it's whatever. And so humans probably initially communicated through some form of tonality or song, and even some modern languages like, some Chinese or Asian languages are very almost sing-songy in their language. So verbal language, being able to sing words and everything, is really right brain for the most part. Obviously, the left brain can sing as well. But even when you have people that have, let's say, a stroke to that area, Broca's area of, on the left, many of them can sing, but they can't speak. And that's also, a clear example of asymmetry, meaning that when you have a stroke in the left Broca's area, you lose your ability to speak. If you get the same thing in the right brain, you don't lose your ability to speak. So clearly, we see that there's this difference between right and left brain. But that's why you can sing with your right, even if you stutter with your left, because you're using your right brain to sing, and the right brain is stronger in a person with stuttering.
A friend of mine her mom has sort of like what RFK has, I think, or
Yes.
something similar. I think she said something about when she like rides her bike, she can speak fine.
Yeah.
And then when she's not riding her bike, she can't. Does
Yeah,
that make any sense to you?
We have to show these videos. I have these videos that are pretty cool. And in the movement disorder world, right? So you could look at stuttering.
I love when I say a random thing like, oh, this person can only speak when they're on a bike. And my dad's like, I'm glad you asked. I have the exact answer to that.
I do. I have a video.
I have a
video
shit to him all the time.
I have a video that we need to show. It's actually pretty cool. It's like 2 videos. And they're classic videos that have been around. And they've been in the movement disorder world. So movement disorder means anybody that has tics or movement or abnormal movement, or stuttering is an abnormal movement. Tourette's involves abnormal movement, Parkinson's, things like that, right? And there's a couple of things that are known in that world, and there's a couple of cool videos. First of all, for years, it's been known that people that have, random dystonic movement, that is an imbalance in an area called the basal ganglia. And for the most part, it's a deficit on the right side, overactivity of the left side of the brain in most cases. And there's one video that's out there that's pretty cool. This guy, he's got all this dystonic movement and he's moving all around.
You guys should watch the video of this episode because my dad is very...
I'm doing. And
he's showing all the movements.
And they come out with blue glasses.
Oh, yeah. I saw this at your lecture that I went to.
And they put the blue glasses on and the movement stops.
That was crazy, yeah.
And the guy gets up and can walk normally.
Yeah.
And then they take off the glasses, and then then as soon as he takes off the glasses, the abnormal movement comes back. And then they put just a blue piece of paper in front of him.
And he can
when he
walk
looks
towards
at
it.
the paper, he stops with the movement. And then as they move the paper away, there's a certain point where they get to a distance where it comes back. Now, there's another video of a guy like that who has those kind of movements, and he gets on a bike, and then he can ride off without those movements.
Oh, okay.
So it goes back to what you were just saying.
what I just said. But, and yet, okay, I have so many questions. What you're saying about putting the blue piece of paper in front of him, that's why we suggest people wearing like people that are like me, who are very right brain and a left brain deficit. Warm colors stimulate your left brain, cool colors stimulate your right brain. And it's really the reflection of the color on the eyes, isn't it? Which is why the piece of paper worked as well as the lenses on him.
Yes, because it's the frequency of the color, and it activates different receptors in your eye that go to different areas of the brain. And the blue-green colors go specifically through what we call more of the magnocellular. Wow, that's impressive.
I'm just kidding. I
the
just copied you.
Magnocellular receptors and the dorsal stream. And that is primarily more right brain, visual, parietal areas. And then the left is more what we call parvocellular and ventral stream. So again, there's a science behind all of this. And science goes back where they know that if they had people look at red, or you use red, it inhibited their magnocellular pathways, which are more specific to the right brain. So using blue or green inhibits the parvocellular.
Wait, what did riding a bike do though?
So when you're using gross motor movement, so big muscles and balance is more right brain motor activity. Fine motor, like using your fingers for fine motor, typing, writing, speech, is more left brain regulated, and motor planning and sequencing. But when you're doing more gross motor, big muscle movements and things that require more balance and spatial awareness, like riding a bike, that is more right brain. So I think with both of those things, the reason why it stops the tremors or the movements or the abnormal movement is because both of them are more right brain stimulating. So, and again, this has been known for years in the movement disorder world that blue does this. That's why they created that video. And the video is pretty old, but no one ever explained before how it actually works. But that's what I explained that in my textbook way back when in 2004 when I first wrote it.
Okay. We are taking so many tangents today because there's so many cool little
it's all good information.
To talk about.
It is though.
No, it's badass. All of it is making so much sense. That's why I'm
we
going
have
all
to
over
get
the place,
those videos though, because people, when they see the videos, those videos are wild.
Okay, so back to the question that I was going to ask you in the beginning. When it comes to Tourette's, you're saying that there's a left brain Tourette's and there's a right brain Tourette's. Someone like Louis Capaldi, I don't know him personally. He seems like a really funny, social, talented, creative guy. I would assume right-brained type person. He obviously has had Tourette's symptoms. There are athletes that I know and other creatives that I know that seem to be right-brain people that when they're stressed out, it comes out as Tourette's types things. You also say that there is a left brain OCD and a right brain OCD. And when I explain my OCD to people, not that I'm out there being like, you want to know what my OCD is like? But if it's
about my OCD.
if I ever need to like kind of, or I just think about it sometimes because I just analyze these things, but it's like Tourette's seems to be a very outward thing that you can't control, where I like to explain my OCD as Tourette's of the brain, where like you could be talking to me and I'm staring at you. You have no idea that in my head I'm like, I hope this person dies. No, I don't hope they die. Oh, why did you say that you hope they die? Well, stop. Take that back. No, you take it back. No, why? And that's what, like, I'll literally just be looking at you and that's what is going on in my brain. And it's all of these things that like I'm trying to control but can't really control. And then I think about it and I'm like, wow, God bless that this is just happening on the inside of my brain, because if this were something that I couldn't control on the outside of me, it would be very apparent that at most times of the day, I don't have control over what's going on in my mind. So I was wondering, I mean, I do, but it's tough to control. I was wondering if you think about if that is a connection, like Tourette's, outward Tourette's, and sort of what's going on in my head considered as OCD. Does that question make sense?
Yeah. And to be honest with you, a right brain version of Tourette's is a little hard for me to completely explain. I mean, OCD is a little different. Because,
so maybe it's not exactly.
Well, okay. There's a couple of things. One is, I don't know Louis Capaldi. You know, I think his music is great. I'm assuming he's writing a lot of his music. And I don't know, but he could be a left brain dominant person.
Yeah, you know. True. Sorry, I tried to diagnose him. I'm not a doctor.
No, but the left brain, I mean, there are people that are left brain dominant that are composers. Obviously, I think Mozart was probably like that. And so, you know, there are people, as we talked about, the left brain is creative as well, but it's in a different way. Usually people that are classically trained, that, you know, read sheet music and that play more, you know, precise, or jazz, which is very mathematical. But you'll even see some people on the autism spectrum really singing, and they're able to really mimic, and they may have beautiful voices. So, you know, I mean, just like you could be a left brain or right brain dominant athlete, but most people in the athletics world are probably going to be more right and whatever. So I don't know, Louis Capaldi might be a left brain guy that also is incredibly good with his right brain skills and was able to write songs and that. Because most Tourette's, like true Tourette's, is going to be because of a right brain deficit and over left brain, which is exactly what we were just talking about, where the blue light and will change that. But the left brain does handle what's called motor planning. So the ability to sequence movements smoothly and coordinatively is generated by the left brain. And as we said, the right cerebellum has a lot to do with that. That's where stuttering comes from. So it's possible that really jerky movements, uncoordinated, spasmodic type of movement could be potentially generated by the right brain. Now, in OCD, the type of OCD that you have, it's more of this, because of worry and stress and anxiety and sense of danger, it's this kind of like over-checking thing in your brain, right? Like or you're ritualistically, because rituals are more right brain, whereas like, tics are left brain. So I can explain it with thoughts, but with movements, motor movements. Now, the other thing about that is, again, remember that the brain regulates everything. So it regulates the immune response and the gut and inflammation and anti-inflammation. And so there is something called PANS or PANDAS. We haven't talked about much, but we should do a whole thing on this.
Yeah, I think you've touched upon it before, but I don't know if we did a whole episode on it.
Where, you can develop antibodies that will attack the basal ganglia and can cause tics and OCD and ADHD and, maybe some aggressive behavior. And it can be really, really severe, really severe. And that, to me, almost always happens. Anybody that I've worked with PANS and PANDAS almost always has a right brain deficit first. And then they, and so their immune system is overactive because the left brain activates the immune system. The left brain produces more inflammatory responses. The right brain is more inhibitory of immune and more inhibitory and more anti-inflammatory. But if you're a left brain or right brain deficit, either one, you're usually more in a sympathetically dominant state and your parasympathetic is low. Your gut's not working. You're not really digesting food appropriately, and you're in a more inflamed state. And so therefore, you may develop food sensitivities or autoimmune reactions, or you may get what we call a Th2 dominance, where your antibody system, you're producing antibodies too easily, and then those antibodies can attack your own body. We talked a little bit this when we talked about thyroid and everything.
Right.
And so whether you have a right brain or a left brain deficit, you can have this autoimmune reaction, and you might develop antibodies against your own brain, and you might develop antibodies against your dopamine receptors in your basal ganglia, and therefore might be able to develop a Tourette's or tic or something, even though you might have a left brain deficit.
Okay.
So
what I have going on in my brain, even though I describe it as Tourette's in my brain, there's no connection there.
Well, Tourette's means there's motor. Like there's like physical tics, and in particular, there's usually some sort of vocal tic, right? So what you have going on in your head is a repetitive thought that's kind of like a repetitive movement that you can't stop. But the difference between Tourette's and OCD would be, that's only in your thoughts, as opposed to Tourette's is going to involve your motor system and physical movements.
So if someone were to have a stutter and they came to you to be treated, which has happened many times before, right?
Many.
What is your approach to that?
My approach is I want to dampen their left hemisphere and activate their right, specifically in those areas. But it all starts with, why did it start? Why do they have the stutter? What is the root cause? It's always going to start with the root cause. We're not just trying to manage a symptom. We're not just saying, okay, here's a pill to stop your stuttering. And we're not just going to use like talk therapy, because this is a neurological thing.
Bottom up.
That's
therapy.
top down.
Top down therapy.
So even though talk therapy is more left stimulating, so not that it would be bad to do talk therapy, and I know people that have gotten benefit from talk therapy with stuttering, but the vast majority I don't think are, because at its root it's a neurological imbalance, and we know the areas of the brain involved, but that starts in the brainstem. It starts in childhood. All stuttering starts in childhood, and except for your friend Danae, who ended up developing that later on in life, which means that
because they were stimulating the wrong side of the brain when trying to help
right.
her.
And it ultimately is about the balance in the brain. So even with somebody that may have had appropriate development, still can develop an imbalance in their brain, but most imbalances start in childhood and start with retained primitive reflexes, with not hitting these motor milestones appropriately, or language milestones, or nonverbal language milestones, or early on can show some disruption of their immune system, and things of that nature. So the first thing I would do is I would go back to the beginning. Do they have primitive reflexes? That's number one. Do they have what I call a mixed dominance, right? Where is their right hand, right foot, right eye, right ear all lined up, or is it all left, or is it mixed? Those are things that tell us that something went awry in the early development and the lateralization of the brain, and that is usually going to be the foundational issue. So then we have to go back to the beginning and fix it from the beginning by getting rid of the reflexes, by activating the lower part of the brainstem, by doing bottom-up therapy, and then we can add top-down therapy to it at the same time. So I would use like the brain driver, and I would use the eye lights. I would use red, or I'd do things to stimulate the left brain and inhibit the right, because ultimately that's what's causing that stuttering. And obviously we need to boost the cerebellum. There's things we can do like galvanic stimulation right over the cerebellum. We use what's called bone stimulating headphones, which are really vibration.
Yeah, I have those.
And you have those as well, that can really help to balance out the vestibular system. So all of those tools, but neurologically you have to balance out that system, and that's ultimately the answer for it.
Okay. Wow.
But now, if you're dealing with somebody who seems to be a very right brain dominant person, mm-hmm. and who has tics, like say Louis Capaldi is that, or there's athletes out there that are that, then you really got to look at the immune system. You got to look at their gut, and you still have to go back to the brainstem and balance the sympathetic and parasympathetic, because that's ultimately what's causing the gut problem. We've said this over and over. People out there in the functional medicine world will say it all starts in the gut with inflammation and food sensitivity. It doesn't. It starts in the brainstem with an imbalance of the sympathetic and parasympathetic. That affects the gut maturity. That causes leaky gut, or makes it stay a leaky gut. And that leads to food sensitivities, and that can create the imbalance between Th1 and Th2, which makes us produce antibodies, and those antibodies can ultimately attack our brain or our thyroid or something like that. And so if that's the case, then we need to address that as well. So we need to specifically do that, and there are different supplements. A friend of mine named Dr. Sam Yannick is somebody out there doing a lot in the functional immunology world. And, obviously, my good friend and partner, Dr. Peter Schreier, is doing a lot in Atlanta with functional immunology, and working with me on developing this model of neuroimmunology and how the brain. And so that's the thing. We're trying to navigate how the brain and the nervous system and the immune system really work. And to even answer some of these questions, like, and the role of the hemispheres is pretty well documented in the brain and the immune system. But what specific areas do what and how it controls it, those are things. And like I told you, we just submitted this massive paper on this that I think is one of the most advanced papers on neuroimmunology.
When does that come out?
I don't know. First, it has to be accepted. We submitted it to a journal of neuroimmunology, and so we have to, that process can be a long process. Sometimes it can take up to a year going back with approvals back. That's why when a lot of people don't realize, they'll say, oh, do you have peer reviewed research? Yes. Or if people look and they're like, well, there's not enough research, or, they publish paper. I don't think people realize what you go through when you publish a paper in a major journal. I mean, there's a lot of bad journals out there, but in really top tier journals, it's really hard to get a paper published. You submit a paper and then it goes to some of the best researchers in the world that are on their editorial board. They tear it apart. They nitpick every little thing about it and attack it in every way they can. And then you have to go back and answer all of their questions. And then it goes out again. And then other people may, and I mean, we have sometimes it can take up to a year of going back and forth like that. Like we've had to revise papers. One paper we had to revise that was a major paper in Journal of Developmental Autism and Journal of Developmental Disorders. 11 times we had to rewrite that paper.
My right brain would never.
Oh, and believe me, if it wasn't for my partner Jerry Leisman and
your left brain,
I don't do that stuff well. But he's incredible, and some of my other research partners. But so that's what people don't realize, that like they question a paper or say, "Well, I saw this paper and I don't know if it's a good paper." Okay, well.
It already got questioned 700 times.
Exactly.
So it's pretty good if it's published.
Exactly. Especially if it's in a top journal. So, and I have over 100 publications like that. And my research partner has over 500.
Where do you keep your papers where, like, if people want to read?
On my website, most of them. But if you go to PubMed or even Google Scholar and you just put my name in, you'll see all my publications will come up, because all of my papers are what's called open access, meaning anybody can get them. Most papers are private, like you have to be a researcher or you have to pay for the paper. We do it so that when we do the paper, we make sure that it's free for anybody. And that's when you really believe in your research and you want the whole world and the whole scientific community to have access to it. You have to pay money for it to be open access.
Sorry, I'm laughing because I feel like you say a million words that no one could possibly try to figure out how to understand. And then you're like, we make our papers open access, which means the access is open to everyone. It's like, yeah, that one I figured out.
There you go.
But thanks for explaining it.
Duh.
Okay, well, I think that was enough information for today. That was actually very fascinating. I found out a lot more than I didn't even know. Which actually now I have more questions, but that's why we have a podcast. We can ask them next time.
That's it.
Okay, well, that was very great. As per usual, you guys have questions, send them my way. And if you'd like to help your brain, you can get one of these brain drivers on our websites. And until next time.
And we'll be reviewing other equipment and other tools and other things that really can be helpful as we go down the road. We want to go a little bit more towards really talking about what to do and how to do it and the tools, and even be more specific as we go down the road.
For sure.
Okay.
Okay, well, I love you.
I love you, honey.
Okay, bye.
Bye.